Rain needles the porch roof, as if it's been waiting for this hour as long as I have. The last voicemail has lived in my phone like a seed in frost. 9 years of not touching it. 9 years of telling myself that silence was safer than whatever she said. It was from my sister. Left the day before she died. I kept it like a splinter I refused to pull, pointing to it whenever I needed proof that I was the injured one. I told myself I didn't need to hear her voice to know what it would say. I told myself I could guess the shape of her apology or the absence of one, and that guessing was enough. I am 48 now, and I have learned that guessing is a way of staying blind with both eyes closed. Tonight, the house is finally quiet, after too many dinners eaten separately. The dishwasher hums like a soft denial. On the counter, there is a grocery receipt curled up like a seashell. $112.43. Milk, onions, paper towels, small life things that hold us together while the big ones pull us apart. The rain wants to be a metronome, steady, forgiving. I sit at the kitchen table with the old phone I can't let go of, the one with her message inside it. Beside it is the newer phone, slick, indifferent. The old one is winter blue and scuffed at the corners from purse battles and glove box summers. It still smells faintly of my past, hand lotion, pencil shavings, burnt coffee. The message count shows a single red one, patient and accusing. 9 years ago we fought on that same porch. It was July then, heat rising off the driveway in dizzy waves, cicadas grinding the air down to a single nerve. We were mirror women with mismatched frames. She was younger by 4 years, and always walked a step ahead. I was the one who kept the freezer full of emergency lasagnas, who paid Mom's electric bill when the pension stretched thin, who had a spreadsheet for everything except grief. She was the one who told jokes at hospitals, who stole the nurses' hearts, who left early when it got too hard to stay. We were both right about ourselves and wrong about each other. The fight wasn't even original. It had a long genealogy of small stings. Who remembered Dad's cardiology appointment? Who missed the recital? Who used whose words against whom? But that day, it gathered into a weather system. The precipitating detail was money. It almost always is. A missing $3,200 from Mom's account. A new necklace that looked like it cost $3,200. A question I asked already knowing the answer I preferred, because anger is a kind of certainty and certainty is addictive. You always do this, I said. What, breathe, she said, and held her hands up like I was pointing a gun, and she was tired of the performance. Something in me snapped and hardened, like sugar taken too far on the stove. I said things that floated in the heat and would not come down. She said things that sounded like protection but were really retreat. You never asked why, she said, but I wasn't listening for why. I was listening for a confession that fit the story I'd already made. If you had asked me a week later, or a year, or now, I would have said I was defending the truth. The truth in my version was that I'd carried the family like a sack of wet laundry while she ran around collecting compliments. That I'd been the responsible one, and she'd been the hurricane. That she owed the apology, and I owed nothing. The funeral came too fast, like a verse you trip over, because you never thought you'd have to say it out loud. A two-car collision at an unlit intersection, a stranger's mistake, turning into my private catastrophe. I wore black and considered it a uniform for the war I'd been drafted into at birth. I stood by the lilies and agreed with people who told me I was strong. I didn't correct them when they said sisters are complicated, with a sigh that let us all off the hook. I kept the voicemail like proof that she had reached out, and that I had been too busy healing to reach back. That's the story I told myself, and like most stories we clutch, its neatness was a warning label I ignored. Now it's 9 years later, and my oldest has just called to say he can't make Thanksgiving. There was a pause before he said it, and in that pause I heard my own mother's pause, the one she used before asking for money when she still believed she didn't deserve it. I told him it was fine and ended the call and stared at the empty plate next to the sink like it was waiting for a guest who'd stood me up. The need to finally know snuck up on me between the rinse and the dry cycle. Not a thunderclap. Not a revelation. Just a quiet enough. The rain taps a code I choose to read as permission. I open the old phone. It wakes slowly, like an animal called from hibernation. My thumb hovers over play. The kitchen clock ticks in a new language. I think about the night she died, how I knew the police officer was delivering bad news from the way he held his hat, the way he didn't step fully into the doorway. I think about how grief is stingy with facts. How it hands you one and expects you to decorate your entire life with it. Behind the rain, I can hear the neighbor's wind chime struggling for a melody. I remember the necklace, a blue glass teardrop, and how it caught the July sun and threw a shard of light onto my collarbone, like it wanted to mark me too. I remember the $3,200 and the language I gave it. Betrayal, theft, proof. I remember how she said, "You never asked why," and I remember refusing the question because answers require more of us than blame does. I put my finger down. There is a click, a breath, the small electronic whir that precedes a human voice. Her voice is younger in the machine than in my memory. It sounds like a room I used to live in. "Hey Joe," she says, like we're between errands, like the fight never carved its scar. "Don't hang up." For 9 years, my body has flinched at that line I hadn't even heard. I do not hang up. I think of all the dinners I salted with resentment. All the holidays where her absence was the loudest guest. All the times I told my children that boundaries are love, when what I meant was I am still afraid. Rain softens to a hush as if the sky is leaning closer. "Please let me explain about Mom," she says. Something tight inside me loosens and then bolts again. About Mom? The story I've always told doesn't have room for about Mom. It ends right before this sentence. It ends with me righteous and unsatisfied. But here we are, in the doorway where I never let her stand. I steady my breathing and let the next words come. Because what she says next will rearrange every room in me, and I want to hear it from the beginning. "Please let me explain about Mom," she says. Her breathing fuzzes the speaker, a small weather inside the larger weather of the kitchen. "First, don't get mad," she adds, which is how I know I already am. She laughs once, brittle, quote. The old phone is warm in my hand, human. I lean forward as if the device could hear me listening. "It was the utilities," she says, quote. A picture opens with the same quick cruelty as a match. The yellow past due slips, the way our mother stacked mail under a glass paperweight like grief was something you could flatten. She wouldn't tell you, my sister says, quote. I taste metal. On the counter, the grocery receipt glows under the under-cabinet light like a confession typed in tiny numbers. "I took the $3,200, she says, each digit precise as a step on thin ice. Not for me, for the shutoffs, for the last cardiology bill, quote. I close my eyes and the porch in July comes back meaner. The necklace bright as blame. Her shrug a shield I turned into a weapon. Okay, her voice goes on, softer, quote. Rain steadies, like a listener tapping a knee. I pawned my guitar to buy it, she says. It's glass, Joe. $26 at the thrift store and the rest went to the aid. I wanted Mom to have something pretty, quote. I open my eyes to the sink. A single fork is soaking like it asked for mercy. I feel childish, ridiculous. 9 years of anger at a piece of thrifted glass. 9 years spent polishing a grudge like silver while the truth tarnished in a drawer. There is a new sound in the message. A pause that isn't mere breath. It is decision. And Mark, she says. His name lands with the chilly certainty of a fever-breaking quote. Lightning without thunder, just light. He called me the day before the shutoffs, she says, voice quickening, quote. Mark. My husband. The man who that July stood behind me on the porch like a column I leaned against. The man who nodded gravely while I enumerated failings that weren't mine. Don't tell her, my sister repeats, not mocking, just exact, single quote quote. I press my thumb and forefinger into the bridge of my nose until I see tiny fireworks. The betrayal is not only theirs. It is mine, arranged like flowers around my own certainty. I thought I could fix it, she says. I thought I could be the bad guy if you needed me to be, quote. Water slides down the kitchen window in watery handwriting I can't read, single quote. How many times over the years did my righteous story borrow his tone? How many rooms did that tone decorate? I was going to put it back, my sister rushes, as if the dead are evaluated for haste. My next check and the one after that. But then Mom fell, quote. I do. I know the cold chair at the end of the emergency room hallway. I know the coffee that tasted like a dare. I know the way every phone call after midnight is a version of the same story, and how the details change the way a sentence changes just because someone else is reading it. She clears her throat. Also, she says, almost whispering, what? The room tilts, not enough to throw me, just enough to make every object strange. I mouth absurdly to a phone that cannot see. She called me after, my sister says. She was embarrassed. He said it was to catch up on the mortgage, that he didn't want to worry you. She thought she was helping, and when she needed help later, she couldn't bring herself to ask you again, quote. I have been humiliated exactly 3 times in my adult life, quote. The second was when my youngest told his classmate, within my earshot, that I keep a whiteboard on the fridge because I don't know how to talk. Only plan. This is the third. It is not the worst and not the loudest. It is precise. I'm not blaming him, she adds too quickly. Quote, the word sorry lands without the triumph I always imagined it would deliver. It is a flat stone skipping once, twice, then sinking, because it comes braided with something I had placed outside the fence of my generosity. Context. The kitchen lights seem too bright. I flick one off and the room softens, admitting the truth more kindly. My sister inhales. There's more, she says. Of course there is. The universe never sends a single envelope. I found Mom's old blue binder. Quote, I see it immediately, grease spots like maps of a small country on the macaroni page. She had tucked a photocopy of her will into the flap, my sister continues. She changed it after Dad died. She left you the house because, order, single quote. I swallow and it scratches all the way down. Joe, I think she was relying on us to be the things she'd never been able to teach us to be. Quote, the silence that follows is not empty. It is stacked with furniture I have to move. Finally, her voice returns, thinner. I'm going to drop the necklace at your porch tomorrow, she says. Quote, she laughs, catches it, steadies. Quote, my body leans into the present as if it has a say. The day after this message, there was no tomorrow for her. No porch to climb, no blue thing left behind except maybe the sky, which refused to explain itself. The voicemail clicks off. The kitchen is full of Rain's quiet applause, as if the sky approves of even this late hearing. I stare at the old phone and the new phone and the woman seated between them, a witness with a ledger that is suddenly useless. I want to be angry at Mark and at her, and at the past for refusing to tidy itself. But the anger swims, confused, looking for the narrative it once lived inside. I reach for a pen and an envelope because I don't know what else to reach for. I write his name on the front and then mine, like two sides of a coin finally deciding who is heads. I breathe, in, out. Something unclenches in my jaw. Not mercy, not yet. Just space. Space big enough to hold the fact that I have been wrong about a detail that was not small. Space big enough for the mortifying tenderness of being informed. I take the old phone upstairs because I don't want to hear it die when the battery gives up. I set it beside a framed school photo of my boys and their crooked smiles. Downstairs, the dishwasher's cycle changes. A chime for the clean. I still see porch heat, July, blue glass. The way my words climbed on each other to appear taller. I am returned to this kitchen with Rain and a choice, to keep the story that protects me, or to let it cut me open and clean me out. I choose the cut, and I reach for our bedroom door to wake Mark into the truth I've just heard. I wake him with his name said carefully, like a glass I'm moving from one shelf to another. Quote, he grunts, then rolls, eyes bleary, the posture of a man who expects a schedule, not an impact. The voicemail, I say. The rain etches the windows and the house seems to lift to hear us. He blinks toward the alarm clock. 2:11, red numbers like a wound calmly keeping time. I sit on the edge of the bed. My hand finds the seam in the quilt the way my mind finds the seam in any story. I listened, I say. The way I imagined he would. He knows which. Okay, he says, exhale long. It's the okay he uses in meetings, the one that promises a plan and hides a preference. She said you asked her not to tell me, I say. About the shutoffs. About the $3,200. He pulls the pillow into the space between us and props his head on it, buying a second. I didn't want to pile on, he says. You were barely sleeping. The mortgage. It was not my mother's job, I say quietly. His eyes flinch, not because of the volume, but because the sentence lands in a place he has kept tidy. I asked her, he says. I thought I could float us until the bonus, quote. The word sits like a nail on the bedsheet. Inadequacy is not a contagion you protect me from, I say, quote. He closes his eyes. I watch a muscle in his jaw count its choices. Joe, you weaponize information, he says, soft, almost fond. You turn every number into an indictment, quote. He is not wrong, it makes me angrier. The rain thickens, a curtain of static. I think of my sister's voice finding its courage inside a machine. I think of the way I draped certainty over my shoulders and called it warmth. I blamed her, I say, quit. I know, he says. He says it like he watched it happen, and assumed that was the price of keeping the air thin enough for him to breathe. You let me, I say, and now my voice is not quiet, quote. He sits up, the pillow becoming a negotiation tool he forgets he's holding. You wouldn't have listened, he says. You had a story already, quote. I swallow the yes. It tastes like a coin someone else has touched. I'm listening now, I say, quote. His shoulders sag. He rubs his forehead with his thumb, then both hands, the gesture of a man wiping a screen that keeps rewriting itself. I was short, he says. The quarter before the acquisition, commissions froze, you remember? Our checking was thinner than I said. I thought if I could bridge the month, no harm, no panic. Your mom offered, quote. Yes, but then there was the car repair, then the dentist, then the braces, and he stops, resets, quote. The sentence lands like a truth I hate for being honest. You protected yourself from my reaction by outsourcing the cost, I say. To my mother, quote. He nods. A small nod, not absolution, not defiance. More like a man agreeing with a diagnosis. And I protected myself from the truth, I add, quieter, quote. The room shifts. The quilt's pattern is little blue leaves, their repetition suddenly tender. I ask, quote. Because, he says, and stops. Because is the word that doesn't believe in the audience's generosity. Because I was ashamed you'd think I'm careless, he manages. And because when I tried to bring up money, you lined up facts like soldiers. I don't win in that war, Joe. We sit in the rain sound. He is not a villain here. Neither am I. We are a church of two in which confession is a language we learned late. I need to change how I hear, I say. What? He nods again, larger, like his neck has been waiting for permission to move. I'm sorry about your sister, he says. The apology is not an argument. It is a bowl placed between us. I'm sorry too, I answer and let the bowl be. One ask. No, he says. Only that you hated it, quote. I hated what I thought it meant, I say, quote. A small sound from the hallway, our oldest door adjusting in the night. I think of him saying he can't come for Thanksgiving and of my immediate smile, how efficient it was at hiding the sting. Tomorrow, I say, I'm going to Mom's place, the binder, receipts, whatever is left, quote. I'll come, he says, then glances toward the clock, that red wound, quote. I let that be a generous offering instead of another defense. Thank you, I say. I also need to talk to the home health agency, and the power company, and... Joe, he says, gentle hand on my wrist, quote. I breathe and feel seen and slightly resentful. Two things at once, a skill I'm acquiring late. I'm not building an escape hatch, I say, quote. He squeezes and lets go. He asks, quote. You were not wrong to be angry, he says, quote. We exhale at the same time, a soft surrender of air. My mind goes to the porch, July, that blue shard of thrifted light on my skin. I want to write a letter to a dead woman and a living man and my own past self and tell them, I'm trying. I am late to trying, but I am here. He asks, practical. Water, quote. I need you to tell me when you are scared, I say. Not later, quote. He nods like a student repeating a rule back to the teacher. I almost laugh at the reversal. Instead, I reach for his hand. It is warm and not entirely steady. We stay like that for a while. Two people who have been on opposite sides of a door they both installed. The rain gentles to mist. The house hums in an ordinary way. I want to listen to it again, I say, quote. I'll go downstairs, he says, quote. Stay, I say, quote. So we sit on our bed and I press play, and my sister's breath fills the room that was never built for her voice. And when she says, I'm practicing not running away, our hands tighten, as if we are promising someone we loved that we will learn what it means to stay. When the click comes and the room returns to itself, I look at Mark and say, we're going to tell the boys, quote. Okay, he says, and it's a different okay, one that doesn't rush to fix. We lie back, eyes open to the dark. It is not forgiveness yet. It is the room that comes before with the lights off where you have to sit long enough to see the furniture by memory. I whisper my sister's name. It doesn't break me. It breaks something that needed to be broken. By morning I will open the blue binder and the house of my story will shudder, because the truth is coming in with both hands full. We drive to my mother's house in a rain that looks deliberate. The porch boards have the soft give of a bruise. I still have a key because I am the one who keeps keys. Inside, the quiet is thick as the dust. The clock above the mantel is stopped at 4:17, and for a second my mind tries to make that the time of death, then unclenches. Not everything is a symbol. Sometimes batteries just die. The blue binder is where I left it 9 years ago, on the second shelf between a church cookbook and a stack of clipped coupons held by a chip bag clip. I lift it with both hands. It has the weight of a small child, fat with recipes, and I now know other ways of feeding. Mark hovers, then begins a practical tour, windows latched. Mail gathered, the rituals of a man who fixes a room before he faces what happened in it. I sit at the kitchen table and open the binder. 19, tucked behind lemon bars, is a letter from the power company with final notice stamped in red, dated July 7th. 4 days before the fight, I place it on the table like evidence and keep going. Behind, chicken tetrazzini, a receipt from the home health agency, $1,280 previous balance, a balance brought to zero by a cash payment. My sister's signature, messy but there. A folded photocopy of the will, just as the voicemail said. The note in Mom's handwriting. Block letters the way she wrote when she needed to trust her own hand. They will take care of each other. I trace the letters with my finger like an old root. Inside the back cover, there's an envelope buttered with grease. Quote, "It is not sealed." I look at Mark, who has stopped moving. He's watching me like I'm cutting the right wire in a movie that doesn't have an explosion, only a room that might get quieter. I slide out a single-page printout, bank activity, August through October of that year. And there, my name on an automatic transfer I'd forgotten, $250 twice a month into an education fund, a plan I made during one of my high-lit resolve crusades. I remember deciding that money was no longer spare, it was sacred, and how vocabulary is one of the ways I bless myself. Quote, "Convenience has a shadow." I stare at the line item and feel a slow, clean humiliation. I thought that was from our account, I say, quote. Mark leans over, scans, and nods, not with accusation, not with mercy, just with the comprehension of a mess. We are quiet with it. The binder is a little room that contains us and our better and worse forms, everyone's fingerprints layered into a smudge you can't assign. A knock at the back door startles both of us. I open it to Mrs. Alvarez, the neighbor with a floral umbrella and eyes that always knew more than they told. She presses a small envelope into my hand. "From your sister," she says, quote. She doesn't finish the sentence, quote. I hear the sentence as judgment and then I hear it as care. Inside is a pawn ticket, blue paper, the kind that stains your fingers, a location and a date, quote. My sister's guitar, the girlhood one, the one she had played until our father said, "Some people need labor, some people need rhythm," and handed her a broom, quote. I sit down, the chair complains, I want to hate the fact that this proof exists. I want to hate the proof that I needed it. Instead, I just hold the ticket and let the rain make the world plausible. We spend the late morning inventorying what I never inventoried. 2 shoeboxes of receipts I once called chaos, but which now look like a very faithful record of trying. A list on a post-it of passwords, many crossed out and replaced, little maps of aging. An old voicemail transcription service printout, the kind with mangled words and guesswork punctuation. I skim and stop, quote. I press the paper to the table as if it might otherwise escape back into the past. At noon, we drive to the agency office 3 towns over, where the manager who once fielded my clipped questions looks older and somehow smaller. She remembers my mother and smiles with her eyebrows. We pay a balance that I didn't know I owed because knowing would have cost me the story in which I owed nothing. 67, the kind of amount that won't ruin you, which is precisely why it ruins so many relationships. In the afternoon, we sit our sons down in the living room. The rain has gentled to a patter that sounds like someone washing their hands. I set the blue binder on the coffee table between a scented candle and a stack of coasters I bought to protect the finish I never have time to admire. I tell them the story I have rehearsed, and then I stop and tell them the newer one. I say their aunt's name without flinching. I say mine. They are young men with their own arrangements of pride. Our oldest looks at me the way he did when he was 5 and asked why the sky stays up. "Mom," he says, careful. "You always say context is not an excuse," quote. I nod and try not to smile. He's quoting me back to myself, a mirror as soft as it can be. I also say lenses can be dirty, I answer, quote. Our middle one crosses his arms, quote. Yes, I say, and enjoy the way it startles him, quote. It's not a metaphor to him, it's a task. The check engine light of family turning into a road trip. Mark looks at me. His face is open in a way I haven't seen since we were both poor enough to ask the sky for clearance to proceed. We should go, he says. It doesn't sound like leadership. It sounds like accompaniment. Before we leave, I walk back to the kitchen and pull down the small wooden box where Mom kept her good things. Old buttons, a silver thimble, a clip-on earring without its mate. Nestled under a patch of velvet is the blue teardrop necklace. I pick it up and hold it against my collarbone. It is colder than I expect. Cheap glass doing a rich thing. I clip it on, let it live above the place where grief leaves its mark. At the pawn shop, the bell above the door rings a memory I didn't have until right now. The man behind the counter is possibly the same man from then, or maybe they all look like this. Thin, practical, a carefully neutral face built for other people's small emergencies. I set the ticket down. He takes it, swivels in his stool into the back room, then returns with a case as scuffed as my old phone. My hands shake. I don't make a ceremony of it. Ceremonies are another way to hide. I open the case. There it is. The ding in the lower bout is larger than described, a half-moon bruise. I touch it and try not to apologize. This one aged nice, the man says, quit. I hand over a receipt that says $96. The boy behind me shifts, impatient for his turn to get cash for a video game or a decision he's calling a mistake so it has a chance to become a story later. In the car, the guitar rides shotgun like a passenger who's already heard the plan. Quote, "It lands on my screen like a small miracle that doesn't need the name. I tell Mark one my sister a song I never listened to. He says we'll find someone who can teach us where to put our fingers. On the way home, we pass the intersection where the light never got fixed, where a stranger made a mistake that became a chapter title in my life. I don't look away. I say my sister's name in the present tense, and then in the past, and then again in the present, just to practice not running. The rain lifts and leaves a gloss over everything. The road, the low sky, the space between us. We drive into it like we have a map. Tomorrow we will stand by the water with the blue necklace in my fist and decide what goes back and what finally comes home. We go to the water at dusk, the necklace in my pocket and the guitar in the trunk. The river is high from the week's weather, shouldering past stones like a woman refusing to make herself small. The boys fan out along the bank, slinging stones, calibrating their throws with the seriousness of ritual they'd never call ritual. Mark stands with his hands in his coat pockets, which usually means he is keeping something to himself. Today it just means he is cold. I take the blue glass out and let it rest in my palm. It looks more expensive outdoors. Cheap things sometimes do once you let the sky in. I thought we were going to return it, our middle says, practical to the bone. We are, I answer. What? I feel for the clasp and undo it, the faintest sound as the chain loosens, a whisper of permission. My sister would have made a joke here. About losing the receipt on principle. About the river being the only place that takes anything back without proof. I hold the necklace over the water and see my own face fractured in the glass. Thank you, I say, quietly and outward, to the river, to her, to the version of me who could not hear this before. Then, before I can change my mind and build another museum, I flick my wrist and the blue drop arcs. It is suddenly a planet and then a small splash swallowed by the hurry, taken without a ledger. I feel the absence immediately, like the pressure loosening after a ring is removed. Mark steps closer, not touching, but near. The boys stop throwing stones and watch the current as if the necklace might return with an opinion. I don't make a speech. I do not appoint meaning. I just stand there and let the water define what returns and what remains. When I turn, Mark is looking at me with that face he used to make when we were 26 and the car wouldn't start and we laughed because we had to walk, and our breath made tiny ghosts in the cold. Admiring, afraid, in love. He asks, "Now we don't lie to protect a temporary feeling," I say, "not to them, not to each other." Quote. He nods like a man signing a contract he actually read. We drive to the grocery store on the way home because grief and hunger share a calendar. Inside, I buy milk and apples, and startling myself, a slice of lemon cake from the bakery case because it looks like a little sun, 43. The number from a different night, a receipt curled like a seashell, returns and sits beside today's plastic bag. We load everything into the car, and I feel the strange relief of not needing to make this a sign. Numbers are also just numbers. At home, I clear a half shelf for the blue binder. Not on the top, like punishment. Not on the bottom, like shame. Right in the middle, where you reach without thinking. I take the old phone upstairs and for the first time since buying its replacement, move the charger from the drawer and plug it in beside the bed. Keeping a thing alive is not the same as keeping a wound open. The boys ask for tacos. We chop, we fry, we spill shredded lettuce everywhere. Quote. Adieu, my fingers are clumsy. The E minor refuses me 3 times and then opens with a sound that feels like a door easing on its hinges. I do not know the song that belongs to this house, but I can learn the first chord, because that's how songs give up their secrets, one honest shape at a time. Before I sleep, I write a letter. It is not long. I say her name. I write the word sorry, but it is braided with I'm listening, which feels more accurate and more costly. I slip the letter into the blue binder behind banana bread, which she always burned, and which I will bake next week without lying to myself about how much sugar it takes to make a thing sweet. I turn off the light. The rain has finally chosen rest. I close my eyes and see a small blue thing returning to a larger blue thing and becoming unfindable, which is another way of saying free. And in that freedom, a new space opens, one that invites me to walk into the rest of the story without carrying a necklace that was never meant to warm my throat for this long. Tomorrow we will start speaking in the present tense about people who are gone, as if love outruns grammar and grief learns new conjugations with us. The next morning the sun is almost rude. It lifts blinds with light and puts its hands on everything I've left unsorted. We have made no formal plan, which turns out to be the plan. Coffee, toast. A list that is short enough to be a tool, not a shelter. Call Mrs. Alvarez. Fine teacher for guitar. Quote. He leaves the note on the counter. An index card turned vow. I take a picture of it because certain kinds of accountability like to be watched. At 9, I dial the number from the old court papers I never looked at, for the man who ran the red light that didn't work, the stranger whose 1 second became my decade. It rings, and then, as if time had been holding its breath with me, goes to a voice that is not a recording. Quote. His voice is older than I expected. I did not prepare words for this. I'm Joan, I say. Quote. The pause is terrible. Then it isn't. Then it is simply human. I've thought about you every day, he says. His voice breaks like a plank under the weight of a sentence that took too long to be spoken. I call the city every month about that light, he continues. I send money to the fund they set up in her name. I didn't know if I was supposed to or allowed to. Quote. We breathe. Thank you, I say. Not because thanks is the right word, but because it is a bridge word, a plank laid between two people who would rather find a different river. I blamed you like it would bring her back, I add. Quote. He laughs once, ruined and grateful. I am sorry, he says. It changes nothing. Quote. I say that I know, because I do. Sometimes the apology is not a lever. It is a light you turn on in a room you've been pretending you could navigate in the dark. When we hang up, I sit with my hands around my coffee mug and realize forgiveness is not what I thought it was. It is not a gift I give to someone else who doesn't deserve it. It is not the badge you pin on yourself when you've won the endurance test. It is the decision to stop curating exhibits of pain in which you are always the docent and the ticket taker and the gift shop manager. It is accuracy. It is letting the facts change you. Quote. I answer bruised. Quote. At lunchtime I go to the cemetery and sit on the low wall because I still can't stand right at the headstone. I play the E minor until it stops fighting me. A woman I don't know brings water to the yellow mums and nods. I used to think the plot was the story. I say to no one and to her. Quote. I tell my sister that Mrs. Alvarez kept her promise, and I kept the guitar, and the boys are taller, and the binder is in the good place, and the necklace is back with the only thing big enough to hold it. The clouds pass like moderate thoughts. On the way home, I stop by the power company office and set up autopay for my mother's final bill, because even after death, systems like to keep their routines. The clerk glances at the date and sighs and says, we all have a file, as if she's blessing me with membership in the Church of the Complicated. At dinner, I tell the boys the difference between secrecy and privacy. Secrecy keeps shame alive, I say. Quote. They do not make eye contact the way they always don't when I'm piloting a thought too close to their age. But later, the oldest comes back and asks if I want help with the E minor. He watched a video. He shows me where to press and how to lift. Quote. I write that down. The next morning, I send an email to the home health aide whose name I used only in the context of scheduling. I say thank you like a person, not a calendar. She writes back a paragraph that opens a window somewhere in me I didn't know was closed. Quote. We plan to meet for coffee. Some stories require more witnesses. Quote. I listen to the recording once more, and it is not a lash anymore. It is a map of exits and entries. When she says, I'm practicing not running away, I pause and write the words on an index card and tape them to the inside of the pantry door, where the spices stand like an orchestra. I think that might be how you rename a house, not with paint, with sentences that you can't help but run into as you reach for the cinnamon. I sleep like someone who has returned a small weight to the earth and found she can lift other things more easily. When I wake, the first thing I notice is quiet, like a room after a party, sweet with the relief of nothing else to prove. And in that quiet, a thin new music starts, the sound of my life making space for the kind of truth that doesn't need to win to be true. Thanksgiving arrives like an earned breath. The sky is cold clean. Our oldest car pulls in and I watch him pause in the driveway to smooth his hair the way he used to at 8. And it strikes me that bodies keep their small rituals even when the mind has moved into other rooms. He comes in with a pie and an apology for last week. Context, I say, smiling. Quote. He laughs and hugs me longer than I expect a busy man to. We set the table with the plates I never use because they ask for gentleness. The blue binder sits on the bookshelf behind me like a quiet ancestor finally invited to the meal. Before we eat, I stand. Not to speechify, not to prosecute, just to name. Your aunt, I say, and her name comes easy. She left a message that took me 9 years to hear. I was wrong about most of it. Quote. We pass the bread in the direction the sun travels. It becomes a game. The youngest insists we go around twice because he thinks abundance is something you can rehearse into the bones. In the afternoon, we take a walk to the river with thermoses of cocoa. The water is sober under the bright sky. We toss in 3 small pebbles because someone says it would be satisfying to watch something sink with no fight. The boys argue about whether skipping counts as surrender or celebration. Mark takes my hand without his old command in the gesture. It's just a hand, gravity agreeing with grace. At home, the guitar waits. We gather in the living room. I hold the neck like it's a familiar animal I finally respect. Quote, I breathe, I place my fingers. E minor arrives without apology. I strum. The sound is incomplete and exactly enough. Mark finds a harmony on a hum, low and sure. The boys whistle the wrong notes and then the right ones. We don't know the song, we invent a kind of staying. After, we sit in the kind of silence that carries chairs of its own. I take the old phone from the shelf and set it on the table. I do not play the message. I do not delete it. I let it sit there, a reminder that some doors don't belong swung shut or open but simply present, proof of a room. Later in the kitchen with dishes stacked like gratitude, I open the pantry and see the index card, her line in thick black pen. I'm practicing not running away, and I answer it aloud, just to be true to the echo. Quote, I pour hot water over tea leaves and watch the color deepen. The house smells like cinnamon and lemon cake and river air smuggled in on coats. I think about accuracy, about testimony, about the way a family is a court that only works when everyone agrees to tell the truest version they can bear. I think about my sister's hands on the guitar, and how wood remembers fingers, and how I want my boys to remember mine as patient. I think about Mark's block letters, and how even vows need revising in the face of weather. I think about the neighbor's umbrella and the pawn shop's bell, and the binder's grease spots, and the pierced surface of a river making room for a small blue thing that had outlived its purpose. I make a cup for Mark and carry it to him. Quote, I answer with a nod. It is enough. At the end of the night, after the boys leave their plates in the sink like offerings, and the house exclaims once as it settles, I stand at the window. It's not raining. The glass holds my reflection. Older, softer, smoldering where I used to be scorched. I whisper my sister's name. It lands in the room like a small bird that trusts the air. I pick up the guitar. E minor. G-A shape I don't know yet. That is the thing about songs. They don't have to resolve tonight. They need a listener who has learned to stay. And in that learning, everything I believed hardens and then melts, and then becomes usable, like sugar taken just far enough on the stove that it turns not bitter, but caramel. Tomorrow I'll call the city about the light again. Tomorrow I'll meet the aide for coffee. Tomorrow I'll write thank you notes that are not an end but a beginning. Tonight I let the last voicemail be what it always was, an invitation to come home. And I step into the house of that invitation with the lights on, the door open and both hands empty. We wake to a Saturday that smells like cold and oranges. Mark makes coffee without commentary. I butter toast with the lazy competence of someone who finally believes breakfast is not a test. At 10, I meet the home health aide, Lila, at the diner with the frayed menus. She is younger than my memory of her, and older than the expectation I pinned to her name. We order the same thing by accident. Scrambled eggs, rye toast, coffee. She laughs and says, I always liked how your mother salted the eggs before she cracked them. And just like that, the room rearranges to include my mother at the table. She said it made the yolks brave, Lila adds. I feel a little rush of heat move up my chest. Bravery for breakfast. I tell her thank you, like a person who understands labor is more than hours. She tells me about the day my mother cried because she mistook the gas bill for a letter from Dad, how embarrassment kept her mouth closed around need, how she kept tissues folded inside the pocket of her sweater sleeve like a secret she could hand herself. We pause when the waitress refills our cups. Your sister, Lila says, almost a question and not one. She was always fast. Quote, she was practicing not running, I say, and Lila nods like she heard that practice in the way my sister tied Mom's shoes, double bow, quick kiss to the knuckle. Quote, her eyes do not soften with pity. They steady with recognition. Most families don't know the price they're paying, she says. Quote, we split the bill. I tip like it's an apology and a promise. Outside, the air is a clean blade. I call Mrs. Alvarez as I walk to the car. She picks up mid-ring like she was already answering. I like the way you say hello, she says. Quote, we talk about the light at the intersection, about the city's slowness and the way slow is sometimes a synonym for never. I ask how she kept the envelope safe for 9 years. She says, I put it with the sugar, as if it were a recipe that would eventually be made. I thank her for guarding a future. At noon, I meet Mark at the bank. He holds the door with his hip while I shake rain off my coat that didn't fall. We sit with a woman whose desk is designed to look like it's not a barrier. We remove my name from my mother's account. We ask about habits for two people who have lived like one person in a house that demanded three. We set up a way to tell the truth even when the truth is inconvenient. Alerts, the woman says, pleasant. Yes, I say, quit. We look at each other, and I understand he hears the sentence under the sentence. No more silent favors. No more noble lies. On the sidewalk, Mark tucks the folder into his jacket. He asks, we share a sandwich because we don't need our own, not because we can't afford two. I mention that our oldest is bringing the pie again for Sunday dinner. Mark mentions that he's been practicing saying, I'm scared I'll disappoint you, out loud, until the fear itself gets bored and goes to sit in a different room. We are learning to talk like people who believe words can hold, not harm. In the afternoon, I take the guitar to a teacher named Evan, whose studio is in the bright back room of a house that smells like sawdust and soups. He arranges my fingers like he's setting seedlings into soil. Don't strangle the string, he says. Let your hand be heavy, quote. I play my clumsy E minor and he points to the place where I am bracing. You're guarding, he says, kind. Guarding makes sound small, quote. He tells me to set a metronome on the kitchen counter near the fruit bowl, to let time practice being gentle in my house. As I leave, he says, it's not about getting somewhere, quote. Back home, the pantry door is ajar. The index card is waiting, quote. I take a pen, write underneath, in an uncharacteristically big font. Me too, quote. Sometimes vows need to be visible in rooms where you do small chores. Sometimes that's the only way the body believes them. I call the city and ask about the light, quote. She says it like a blessing and a shrug. I tell her I will call again. I schedule the reminder in my phone, every 2 weeks. Not to harass. To accompany the bureaucracy until it remembers this intersection's name. At 4, I drive to the cemetery with the guitar in the back. No rain, just a winter bare sky that doesn't pick sides. I sit on the low wall again and play E minor until it warms under my insistence. Then G, then a messy C that buzzes until it stops. I don't sing. I speak. You were right, I say to the air that once held my sister's breath. Quote. The wind goes about its business. I take that as permission to say the thing plainly. Forgiveness is not forgetting, quote. I wait to feel scolded. I feel unarmed instead. A child with a pink hat clomps past with her father. She keeps saying, listen, as if the day is trying to tell on itself. I listen. A plane's polite droning, leaves skittering, my own breath making the E string vibrate when I lean too close. When I get home, the boys are at the table doing life. One is making a resume for a job he both wants and thinks is beneath him. One is ordering used textbooks and cursing the way companies rent knowledge. One is sketching the underside of his own hand like he's trying to prove something to himself about seeing. I stand in the doorway and realize this is what stays when you stop curating grievance exhibits. Life keeps making small noises. I put water on for tea. Mark comes in with groceries I didn't ask him to get. He sets lemons, cilantro, and smiling salt on the counter. I ask, trying it, he says, "What?" We laugh and his laugh isn't tight. We are both lighter. Not because nothing weighs anything, because we are not carrying more than belongs to us. After dinner, I dial a number I have avoided for 9 years. My Aunt May, my mother's older sister. We haven't spoken since the funeral because I insisted on being the archivist of my mother's reputation, which had no room for anyone else's footnotes. She answers on the second ring, which feels like a cheap miracle. I was waiting for you to get tired of being right, she says, entirely without malice. I am, I say. Tired, quote. She tells me about our mother's youngness, about the factory line, about the way she would count tips twice like that would multiply them, about the afternoon she tucked her last cash in the piano bench and told herself she was saving for music, and then took it out at dusk for cough syrup. She tells me about my sister's fear of quiet, about how she learned noise could be a kind of kindness. She tells me about me, how I was the branch that thought it was the trunk, how trunks need branches to show everyone which way the tree is trying to grow. When I hang up, the house has settled into its nightly breathing. The metronome sits on the counter where Evan told me to put it. I set it to the slowest speed and let it tick. Time patient. Truth catching up. My phone lights with a text, unknown number. Then I realize, the stranger from the intersection. Thank you for calling, it says. If you ever want to meet at the light, I go sometimes, quote. I type and delete. I let my body decide. Not yet, I write, quote. I place the phone face down, on purpose. I look around the room the way you do when you move into a place you can actually afford. I feel the small thrill of noticing what I already own, space, air, people who will practice with me. I sit with Mark on the couch. We don't make a speech about marriage. We name 3 tiny things we will do differently this month. He will show me the bill before he pays it. Quote, "We will set aside one evening for music that doesn't have lyrics because words have carried too much. The boys drift in and out. Someone tastes the lemon cake and says, 'Huh,' in a way that used to bother me and now sounds like the future clearing its throat. Before bed, I press play on the voicemail again. I don't flinch. I listen to her laugh. I listen to the way she says my name without holding a grudge at the end of it. I hear Mercy refusing to be dramatic. Quote, 'The room does not respond. It doesn't have to. I am practicing staying, and in the staying I feel something I can name without squinting. Relief that doesn't require victory, gratitude that doesn't need groveling, a different kind of strength, one that knows love survives accuracy. I turn off the light and leave the door ajar, a house's version of trust, because tomorrow the real work begins, and it will need daylight. Sunday evening folds the day in half. The house has that after-music hush, as if the air is resting its ears. I stand at the sink with my hands in warm water, letting plates forgive me for stacking them too long. In the window, my face shares the glass with the dark outside. Older, softer. The kind of tired that means the work mattered. I think about the week we just lived. The voicemail finally heard. The binder opened. The necklace returned to something more honest than memory. The guitar tuned to a life that includes the sound of trying. I think about how our family used to move like a row of shopping carts with one bad wheel. How hard we pushed just to be straight. Now sometimes we let the squeak be part of the sound and go slower. Sometimes we switch who steers. Sometimes we take our hands off and see where we drift. The metronome ticks on the counter near the fruit bowl, slow, confident, time showing off its patience. The boys move through the kitchen like weather fronts. A gust of laughter, a draft of debate about the price of books, the clatter of a spoon dropped and retrieved without incident. Mark leans in the doorway, no posture of management, just a man who has agreed to be looked at truthfully. I hand him a dish. He dries with exaggerated care, like each circle of the towel could turn an ordinary object into an heirloom. I ask. He smirks. Quote, I nod toward the index card on the pantry door. I'm leaving reminders where the feelings live, I say. Kitchen, binder, guitar, quote. He puts the dish away and does not correct my wish into a plan. We are getting good at not making each other into projects. I wipe the counter until it squeaks. A clean surface is not a life, but sometimes it's a way to breathe. I think about my sister's line, I'm practicing not running away, and realize the practice is not dramatic. It's granular. It looks like answering the phone when your aunt calls, 67 without a monologue. It looks like asking your child if the ha after the lemon cake is admiration or confusion instead of offense. It looks like setting a metronome and trusting that slow counts. It looks like bringing the guitar to the cemetery and letting notes be notes, not arguments. I rinse a cup and say out loud, because sometimes you have to say it to hear it, that forgiveness is not clearing someone else's record. It's updating your own. It's the miracle of a corrected spreadsheet, the rows lining up with the actual days. It's the permission to stop asking a pain to pay rent. I dry my hands and go to the living room. The old phone sits on the shelf, plugged in, half-charged, humming like a distant neighbor who keeps gentle hours. I sit beside it and look at the blue binder on the bookshelf. My mother's recipes, our family's ledger, my sister's small bravery folded inside flour and sugar. I open to banana bread and touch the grease spots, the exact geometry of a life that was not neat but was deeply attempted. Quote, how long did I assume the right temperature for sweetness was more heat? How long did I choose scorch over slow? Upstairs, someone runs water. The pipes knock like a code trying to remember itself. I think about the stranger's text and the way every apology ripens on its own schedule. I think about the light at the intersection and the woman on the phone who said work order like a prayer for bureaucracy. I think about the pawn shop bell and the man who said wood does a thing while it's waiting. I think about my sister's laugh inside a machine designed to store reminders and how she used it to remind me I am not finished learning how to love. The doorbell rings. Mark gets it. He returns with Mrs. Alvarez, her coat button wrong, her umbrella a blossom closed for the night. She hands me a small bag tied with baker's twine. Sugar, she says. Quote, the bag is heavy. It's sugar, yes, and also a note. I open it, quote. I laugh because I had forgotten that detail. I was 8 and thought mail was a magic trick. Mrs. Alvarez remembers the way a neighborhood holds you when you think you are alone. We make her tea. We sit at the table and gossip about the light, the park bench that splits splinters, the cat that belongs to no one and everyone. She tells us she has taken up walking in the mornings, that the river talks more when it's cold, that she has hidden 3 keys for her own house and sometimes forgets where. Age is a scavenger hunt, she says, smiling. When she leaves, I feel the rare gratitude that has nothing to do with surprising rescue. It is the gratitude of being woven into a small net. We clean up. We turn off lights. We do not analyze. In bed, I scroll through old photos because nostalgia is a familiar drug I am learning to take in safe doses. There is my sister with her guitar, hair half in a braid, an expression that says she knows the camera loves her and isn't sure she loves it back. There is the porch in July, the blue shard on my collarbone, the cicadas doing their factory shift. There is the binder on the counter, flower like first snow. There is my son's hand next to mine, age 8 to my 39, each of us holding a lemon and making the same face. I set the phone down. I do not press play on the voicemail. I do not rehear. I do something more dangerous. I imagine a conversation we never had. I imagine asking why, and staying in the room until the answer arrived messy and apologies arrived late and love arrived anyway. It steadies me, this imagining that is not a fantasy. It is a permission slip for the next time someone needs me to wait. Morning will bring its errands and its emails. Monday will ask to be fed. The city will either fix the light or require another call. The guitar will ask for 3 chords in a row. The boys will test the edges of the budget and of my patience. Mark will find a bill and feel his chest tighten and decide whether to say it first. I will practice staying. I will practice letting truth calibrate the metronome instead of urgency. I will screw up. I will repair. That is the promise, not the threat. I turn to Mark, he's awake, somewhere between sleep and a conversation that can belong to the morning. I whisper, quote. He answers without rushing like he used to. I think enough is a moving target, he says. Quote, we are quiet, we breathe, we let the room be a room, not a courtroom. In the dark, I memorize the shapes. The chair, the dresser, the guitar resting on its stand like a letter that doesn't need to be read to exist. I think about the listeners on the other side of this voice. People washing their own dishes, people holding their own receipts, people with their own blue things that weigh more than they cost. I want to say, you can be late and still be on time. I want to say, accuracy is kinder than certainty. I want to say, there are no prizes for carrying the heaviest story. There is only the relief of setting down what was never yours and picking up what is. But I don't sermonize. I let the images do what they do. A river making room, a binder in the middle shelf, a metronome clicking beside citrus, a phone half-charged, patient, a cheap glass necklace choosing to be sky. In the smallest hours, I get up and go to the pantry. I run my fingers over the index card the way a person might touch a mezuzah. Quote, me too, I say again. Quote, I go back to bed. I let sleep arrive at its own speed. Somewhere between the last tick and the next, I understand that the last voicemail did not change the facts. It changed my readiness to be changed by them. And that is the part of the story I will carry forward, light enough to bring everywhere. In the morning I will choose the present tense.